given that the Wings didn't have two players that contribute, and they did win. And all it took was a heroic third quarter from Caitlin Clark. 17 points for CC, 22 in the third, finishing with a double-double, 29 points, 10 assists for Caitlin Clark.
That is the entire game in about 20 seconds. Indiana got the result it was supposed to get, but Caitlin Clark had to completely change the temperature of the night to make it happen. And the more you look at how this win unfolded, the more interesting the question becomes. Was this a comfortable fever victory, or did Clark rescue Indiana from a game that was drifting somewhere it never should have gone?
Caitlin Clark, 29 points, 10 assists. I mean, Caitlin Clark came alive in the third quarter, really hooked us up, man. Really hooked us up. Finished the game, 29 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists, 28 minutes into the game. That's the first half and 8 minutes into the third quarter.
Because those final numbers can fool you. 29 points and 10 assists looks like a clean star performance. Back-to-back home wins looks like momentum. But through the first half, this was ugly basketball from Indiana, and that matters because Dallas entered the game without two contributors. The speaker specifically highlights Jessica Shepard and Azzi Fudd. That should have created an opportunity for the Fever to control the game early. Instead, Indiana needed one player to flip the entire night. And later, there is another part of this performance that deserves even more attention than the 29 points. It is something buried inside the assist numbers and the possessions Indiana failed to finish, because Clark's box score was impressive, but it arguably understates how much offense she actually created.
Let's get into the box score before we start taking a look at the highlights. 87-98, Indiana Fever win by 9. Folks, look at that first half. First half, we scored 35 points. The Dallas Wings scored 37. 37, 35 in the first half.
Look at that halftime score. Dallas 37, Indiana 35. Not a disaster, but absolutely not the script Indiana wanted against a depleted opponent at home. That is the first warning sign. When a team believes it is building towards something bigger, the question is not simply whether it can survive these games. The question is whether it can impose itself on teams it should beat. Indiana did not do that early. The Fever offense looked disjointed. Several players struggled to finish around the rim, and Clark's teammates were leaving opportunities on the floor. Yet Indiana was still only 2 points down. That meant the game was sitting there waiting for somebody to take control, and Clark did. What makes the third quarter significant is not merely that she scored a lot, it is how she adjusted. Her three-point shot was not cooperating, so instead of forcing the same solution over and over, she attacked differently. She got downhill, she read passing lanes, she worked in transition. She started dictating matchups. That is the difference between simply having a hot shooting quarter and actually controlling a game.
Caitlin Clark, 17 points in the third quarter. Here she is. I don't know why it always does that. It always goes straight to, here it is, Caitlin Clark, crossing half court. Nice screen by Kelsey Mitchell. That's a nice screen by Kelsey Mitchell, actually getting the switch onto Enrique Ongabawale. Nice, boom, boom, dribble, 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 step back, pull up. Iconic Caitlin Clark step back three that we've grown so accustomed.
That step back is the Caitlin Clark shot everybody recognizes. The screen creates the switch. Clark gets the space she wants, and the release is immediate. But the fascinating part is that this was not one of those nights where she could simply bomb away from deep and win the game that way. She finished 2 for 8 from 3. That is 25%. So if you only watch the three-point column, you might think Dallas had done a decent job taking away the most famous part of her game. The problem for Dallas was that Clark did not need the three to dominate the quarter. That is where the evolution of her offense becomes important. Defenders can crowd the perimeter. They can chase her over screens. They can try to force her toward help. But every defensive adjustment creates another read, and Clark is increasingly comfortable taking what the possession gives her instead of chasing the shot everybody expects. That is exactly why the next sequence mattered. Dallas survived the step-back three. Then Clark started attacking the space underneath it.
to enjoying. Then we have Caitlin Clark on the fast break. Goes behind the back. Let's take a look. Caitlin Clark crossing half court on Odyssey Sims. Oops, stop behind the back. Taking it to the rack. Easy finish around the rim. Again, Caitlin Clark doing her thing, playing the passing lanes. Gets in the passing lanes. Page by page Beckers to Arike Ongwale. Caitlin Clark reads it like a book. Plays it. Gets the ball. Makes the.
There is the other version of Clark. Behind the back in transition, change of direction, straight to the rim. Then she jumps a passing lane and turns defense into immediate offense. Those plays reveal why the third quarter became so difficult for Dallas. Clark was not scoring from one location or one action. She was affecting multiple layers of the game at once. If you picked her up higher, she could get downhill. If you relaxed in transition, she attacked before the defense was set. If you got casual with the ball, she was reading the passing lane. That versatility matters because playoff-level defenses eventually take away your first option. They study tendencies. They build coverages around your favorite actions. A player who only has one dominant weapon can be schemed against. A player who can change the answer possession by possession is much harder to contain. And that is why this game should probably be discussed differently from a simple Clark scored 29 headline. The important story was problem solving. Indiana had a first-half problem. Clark identified what was available and changed the way she attacked it.
Getting Paige Beckers in the air, taking it to the hole. Getting it back from AB, getting Paige. Psych, you thought, huh? Getting it to the hole. Nice from Caitlin Clark. These highlights all in the third quarter because the third quarter, from an entertainment standpoint, is where most of the action happened. Caitlin Clark gave us what we wanted. 17 points in.
That sequence against Paige Buchers is a perfect example. Get the defender leaning, fake the initial move, then attack the opening. No complicated explanation needed. That is star shot creation. But now we get to something Indiana cannot afford to ignore. Clark can solve possessions. She cannot be expected to solve every structural problem by herself. The Fever had other players struggling early. The transcript points directly at Michaela Timpson, Aaliyah Boston, and Lexi Hull as having difficult stretches. Timpson's issues were especially noticeable because several possessions ended with balls she could not secure cleanly. That hurts twice. Clark loses an assist opportunity, and Indiana loses a high-value possession around the basket. This is where judging basketball strictly from the final score becomes dangerous. Indiana won by 9, but the pathway to those 9 points was far shakier than the margin suggests. The Fever scored only 35 in the first half, before exploding later. Against Dallas, they escaped that slow opening. Against stronger teams, that kind of start can become a hole that one brilliant quarter cannot erase. So the lesson is not, Indiana played badly. The lesson is more specific. Indiana's ceiling rises dramatically when the supporting cast converts the advantages Clark creates, and the floor drops quickly when those advantages turn into missed finishes, mishandled passes, or empty possessions.
For Caitlin, but like I said, Michaela Timpson, not Michaela Timpson's best day. 3 turnovers from Michaela Timpson, and those turnovers were her not hanging on to the ball. Simple as that. Her turnovers were her not hanging on to the ball. A lot of her misses were her blowing assists. But you know what? It's fine, because I'd rather take Michaela Timpson playing bad once every 10 games than Monique Billings playing good once every 9 games.
That is an important distinction on Timpson. One poor game should not become a reason to completely change the rotation, especially when the argument for playing her has been based on what she gives Indiana over a larger sample of possessions. Young players are going to have nights where the ball looks slippery, where timing is half a beat late, where what usually feels automatic suddenly looks difficult. The coaching challenge is separating a temporary bad night from a real lineup problem. And there is another reason Indiana has to be patient. Timpson's presence changes what Clark can attempt as a passer. A guard like Clark is constantly calculating whether the player receiving the ball can finish the play. If the roll threat is reliable, defenders have to respect that pass, which opens more space for Clark herself. If the connection becomes unreliable, defenses can cheat. That relationship does not show up cleanly in a basic scoring column, but it shapes the entire geometry of the offense. So keeping Timpson involved after a rough performance is not charity. It is about preserving the upside of a partnership that can become increasingly dangerous if the timing continues to improve. And speaking of assists, this is where Clark's final total becomes more interesting than it looks.
Finished the game, 29 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists, 28 minutes into the game. That's the first half and 8 minutes into the third quarter. Caitlin Clark had 6 of the Fever's 7 assists. It would have been like 17 of the Fever's 19 assists, but today was not Michaela Timpson's best day. Today was not Aaliyah Boston's best day. Today was not Lexi Hull's best day.
10 assists is already excellent, but listen carefully to what he is arguing there. Through that portion of the game, Clark had created the overwhelming majority of Indiana's successful passing offense, and several additional opportunities disappeared because the finish never came. That is the hidden part of playmaking. An assist requires 2 people. The passer can make the correct read, place the ball exactly where it needs to go, beat the coverage, and still receive nothing statistically if the shot is missed. That does not mean we invent assists that never happened. The official number is 10, and 10 is the number. But when evaluating the quality of Clark's game, you have to look beyond the official result of each possession and ask whether she consistently created an advantage. She did. That is the deeper payoff from this performance. The 29 points were loud. The third quarter 17 was the obvious highlight. But the Fever offense was leaning on Clark as both scorer and organizer at the same time. Think about the burden that creates. Every defensive possession ends, and immediately Clark is identifying transition opportunities. In the half-court, she is reading the screen coverage. If the defense blitzes, she has to locate the release valve. If it switches, she decides whether to attack the mismatch. If the lane opens, she can drive. If help collapses, she kicks it out. And then if the teammates receiving those passes do not convert, Indiana has to do it all again. That is why the box score does not fully capture the pressure she applied to Dallas. And it also explains why one of Indiana's other fourth-quarter developments was so valuable. For a stretch, somebody else finally provided the shooting punch Clark had been trying to manufacture all night.
We got a show. Fourth quarter, Ty Harris comes in 4 for 4 from 3 for Ty Harris today. She comes in, hits some big shots. Indiana Fever dropped 35 and really put the distance between them and the Dallas Wings on their way to a sweet, sweet, sweet victory.
Ty Harris gave Indiana exactly the kind of release valve a star creator needs. 5 made threes on 5 attempts according to the box score breakdown in the transcript, 15 points and several shots that helped separate the Fever from Dallas. That changes everything. When a defense loads up toward Clark and somebody on the weak side is punishing the rotation, the floor suddenly becomes enormous. The help defender hesitates, closeouts get longer, driving lanes become cleaner. Screens become harder to navigate because leaving the wrong shooter carries an immediate cost. This is how Indiana can make Clark's life easier without asking somebody else to become Caitlin Clark. The Fever do not need every player to create 30 points. They need players to punish the decisions defenses make while trying to stop her. Harris did that in this game. And that brings us to the broader question surrounding Indiana's offense. What is the best version of this team supposed to look like? It cannot simply be Clark dribbling until something magical happens. That may win a game. It may create an incredible third quarter. It may even produce a spectacular stat line. But against disciplined opponents, sustainable offense has to connect the star to the structure around her. Boston has to be a dependable interior partner. Shooters have to stretch the weak side. Cutters have to recognize when defenders turn their heads. Screeners have to create meaningful contact. And the coaching staff has to identify which combinations amplify Clark's strengths without sacrificing everything defensively. This Dallas game offered glimpses of that formula. It also showed what happens when the formula breaks down.
Yeah. Kelsey Mitchell, 9 for 21, 1 for 7 from the three-point line, 23 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists for Kelsey Mitchell. Caitlin Clark, 29 points, 11 of 18 from the field, 2 for 8 from the three-point line. Caitlin Clark didn't have one of her best one of her best nights shooting from 3. This easily could have been a 30 piece. Easily could have been a 30 and 10 night for Kalen. Easily could have been a 30-15 night for.
Now compare those two-star stat lines. Kelsey Mitchell takes 21 shots for 23 points. Clark takes 18 shots for 29 points and adds 10 assists. That is not an argument against Mitchell. Indiana needs Mitchell's aggression because defenses cannot be allowed to build their entire game plan around one creator. But shot distribution matters, and efficiency matters, especially late in games when every possession becomes more valuable. Mitchell's ability to pressure defenses as a scorer is part of what makes Indiana dangerous. When she gets rolling, opponents have to choose which threat gets the extra attention. The challenge is making sure the offense does not become divided into separate individual missions. The best version is not Clark gets hers, then Mitchell gets hers. The best version is when Clark's gravity creates Mitchell opportunities. Mitchell's scoring gravity creates space for Clark. Boston benefits from both, and the rest of the floor becomes easier to organize. That takes us back to the strange first half. Indiana looked like pieces. In the second half, especially during Clark's surge and Harris's shooting burst, Indiana started looking more like a connected offense. That difference is going to determine how serious the Fever can become against elite competition. And there is one more part of this game that should not be skipped just because Indiana ultimately won comfortably. Dallas was missing players the host considered meaningful contributors.
Puts the team on her back, gets the game where it needs to be. Again, Dallas Wings, no Jessica Shepard, who's arguably their MVP. It's the same team, just Jessica Shepard's now there, being the real Nikola Jokic of the WNBA. Azzi Fudd didn't play. She's a three-point shooter, three-point threat off the bench. She can score as well. But again, this is a game that we needed to win. We won at home, and we head up.
That context should raise the standard, not lower it. If Jessica Shepard is as important to Dallas as the speaker argues, and if Azzi Fudd gives them another legitimate perimeter scoring threat, Indiana was facing an opponent operating without part of its preferred rotation. That does not invalidate the win. You play the team in front of you. Injuries and absences are part of professional sports, but when evaluating Indiana rather than merely recording the result, you have to ask a harder question. If Dallas had been closer to full strength, would that 35-point first half have been survivable? Maybe. Maybe Clark still erupts. Maybe Harris still cannot miss. Maybe Indiana finds another gear anyway. But relying on maybe our superstar saves us is not the standard of a team trying to become consistently dangerous. That is why this win is both encouraging and revealing. Encouraging because Clark demonstrated that she can personally seize control when the game starts drifting. Revealing because Indiana needed that takeover in a spot where it probably should not have required one. There is a massive difference between having a superstar capable of rescuing you and building a team that does not constantly require rescue. The Fever want both.
One game. Aaliyah Boston, 16 points, 10 assists for Aaliyah Boston. She missed a lot of layups too. I mean, that first half was Angel Reese would have been proud the amount of layups that she saw getting missed. Sophie Cunningham, 5 points in 20 minutes. Ty Harris, 15 points, 5 for 5 from 3 for Ty Harris. Monique Billings and Maisha Hines-Allen played as well.
Boston finishing with 16 points and 10 assists is another piece of the puzzle that deserves attention. A center producing that kind of passing number gives Indiana another offensive hub. If Boston can receive the ball and make quick decisions while Clark is moving away from the action, defenses suddenly have to guard multiple points of creation. That is where the offense can evolve beyond the simple version people expect. Imagine Clark drawing 2 defenders before giving it up. Boston catches at the elbow. Now the defense is already rotating. Mitchell can cut. A shooter can lift from the corner. A big can dive. That second pass is sometimes the one that actually breaks the defense. 10 assists from Boston therefore means more than the center passed well. It suggests Indiana can run offense through different locations on the floor. And that matters because teams will eventually design coverages specifically to make Clark give the ball up. The answer cannot be fighting desperately to return it to her every time. Sometimes the correct response is letting the 4-on-3 behind the trap destroy the defense. That requires trust. It requires fast decisions. It requires teammates who can become playmakers once Clark's gravity creates the advantage. This is why Indiana's development is more interesting than simply tracking Clark's scoring average. The Fever are trying to learn how to use the attention she attracts, rather than merely survive it. When that happens, her most valuable possession might occasionally be one where she never takes the shot.
At that soliloquy, that psalm that I said over and over and over in my head, it reached the Indiana Fever. It reached all the way in Indiana from over here in New Jersey. It floated all the way, halfway across the country, and landed in Indiana. And grace, love, kindness, humility took over. And I got what I asked for. Caitlin Clark balled out, 17 points.
17 points in a quarter can disguise a lot of problems. It can make a slow start disappear from the final scoreboard. It can turn frustration into celebration. It can change the entire conversation around a game. But championship-level teams eventually have to distinguish between what their superstar can do and what their superstar should regularly be required to do. Clark should be capable of exploding for 17 and a quarter. That threat is part of what makes Indiana dangerous. But Indiana's long-term goal has to be making those explosions a luxury instead of an emergency. Because imagine the opposite scenario. Clark goes 2 for 8 from 3, just as she did here, but the driving lanes are not available. Harris does not go perfect from deep. Boston's playmaking gets taken away. Now where does the offense go? That is the test waiting against better defensive teams. The encouraging sign is that Clark already showed an answer to the first layer. Her perimeter shot did not carry her, so she changed the attack. The next step belongs to the team around her. Can Indiana give her enough reliable counters that one cold shooting category never becomes a crisis? If the answer becomes yes, this team gets much harder to prepare for. If the answer remains no, then games like this will continue to depend on Clark transforming ordinary stretches into extraordinary ones.
And we're moving forward. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, hype the video, subscribe to the channel. That means so much to me. See you next time. Love will win. Humility will win. Grace will win. And kindness will win.
So take the win. Enjoy it. 29 points, 10 assists, a dominant third-quarter takeover, and another home victory are all worth celebrating. But do not confuse the happy ending with a perfect performance. Indiana spent the first half allowing Dallas to dictate far too much of the game. Several Fever players struggled to convert chances. Clark's 3 was inconsistent. The offense needed a major individual takeover before Harris helped stretch the margin late, and yet that is also what makes this performance valuable. Great teams learn from losses, but they can learn just as much from imperfect wins. Indiana gets the result without escaping the film. The coaching staff can point to the first half stagnation and demand better. They can study which lineups gave Clark space. They can evaluate why certain interior passes turned into turnovers. They can examine how Harris became available for those threes and whether those actions can be recreated. They can look at Boston's 10 assists and find ways to use her as a secondary hub more deliberately. Most importantly, they can separate what was sustainable from what was spectacular. Clark scoring 17 in one quarter was spectacular. Clark recognizing that the 3 was not falling and finding other ways to control the game was sustainable. Harris shooting 5 for 5 from deep was spectacular. Creating clean catch-and-shoot opportunities for capable shooters is sustainable. A superstar dragging the team out of trouble is spectacular. Building an offense where the superstar's gravity consistently creates quality shots for everybody else is sustainable. That is the real divide Indiana is trying to cross. There will be nights when Clark hits 6 or 7 threes and the entire building feels like it is vibrating. There will also be nights when those shots hit front rim. If Indiana wants to become more than a team that lives and dies with her shooting variance, this Dallas game provides a blueprint hidden inside the chaos. Let Clark read the game, give her multiple finishing partners, punish the help defense, and make the opponent defend every consequence of sending extra attention toward number 22. Then suddenly the question changes. Instead of asking whether Caitlin Clark can rescue Indiana, opponents have to ask which Fever player they are willing to leave open while trying to stop her. That is a much more dangerous basketball problem. So which version of this win matters more to you? The fact Indiana took care of business and Clark delivered another huge performance? Or the fact the Fever needed a 17-point third quarter from her to take control of a game they should have controlled sooner? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more breakdowns like this, like the video and subscribe.